The sun hung low over Dry Creek, painting the desert sand the color of dried blood. Clara Dawson wiped the sweat from her brow with a threadbare sleeve, her hands raw from another day of scrubbing floors at Murphy's Inn. The copper taste of dust coated her tongue as she stepped onto the wooden boardwalk, her worn boots clicking against the planks like a countdown to nowhere. "Mrs. Dawson?" The voice slithered through the evening air like a rattlesnake. Clara's spine stiffened. She knew that voice. Harlan Boone, president of Dry Creek Savings and Loan, the man who held her life in his soft, greedy hands. "Mr. Boone." She didn't turn around, couldn't bear to see his weasel face with its perpetual sneer. "I trust you received my letter." His footsteps drew closer, each one making her skin crawl. "I did." Clara's fingers curled into fists. "You gave me until the end of the month. That's still 2 weeks away." Circumstances have changed. Boone moved to block her path, his belly straining against a silk vest that cost more than she made in 3 months. "I need that property, Mrs. Dawson. Your late parents' debt has accumulated considerable interest." "You mean you want to steal it?" The words escaped before she could stop them. His eyes narrowed to slits. "Careful, woman. You're already the town pariah. No need to add troublemaker to your list of qualities." Clara bit her tongue. He was right. Curse him. A widow at 24, abandoned by a husband who'd run off with a saloon girl and her meager savings, leaving her with nothing but debt and shame. The good people of Dry Creek had long memories and sharp tongues. "1 week, Boone said, examining his manicured nails. "Pay in full, or I take the house. Unless—" He let the word dangle like bait. "Unless what?" "You could be accommodating. A private arrangement, just between us." His gaze crawled over her like spiders. Bile rose in her throat. "I'd rather sleep with the coyotes." "Then you likely will." He tipped his hat mockingly. "1 week, Mrs. Dawson. Don't test me." Clara watched him waddle away, her whole body trembling with rage and something worse, fear. That ramshackle house was all she had left of her parents, of the life before Thomas had destroyed everything with his lies and promises. Love. What a fool she'd been to believe in it. She turned toward home, steps heavy as lead. The setting sun stretched her shadow long and thin across the dirt road, a dark prophecy of the loneliness ahead. Other women her age were bouncing babies on their hips, sharing supper with devoted husbands. Clara had learned the hard way that such dreams were just mirages in the desert, beautiful from afar, but dissolving into nothing when you reached for them. "Watch it." Clara stumbled as a horse thundered past, so close she felt the heat of its flanks. The rider pulled up sharp, wheeling the black stallion around with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. "My apologies, ma'am." The voice was deep, whiskey smooth with an edge of genuine concern. Clara looked up and up. The man atop the horse cut an imposing figure against the dimming sky. Broad shoulders filled out a dust-covered duster, and beneath the wide brim of his hat, she caught a glimpse of sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds. James McAllister. Everyone in Dry Creek knew who he was. Owned the largest ranch for 100 miles in any direction, more cattle than the mind could count, and enough money to buy the whole town twice over. He was also, according to the gossips at Murphy's Inn, a man who kept to himself since returning from the war 10 years ago. "No harm done," Clara muttered, stepping back. But McAllister didn't ride on. He studied her with those gray eyes, taking in her faded dress, her work-reddened hands, the determined set of her jaw. Then his gaze shifted past her, toward where Boone had disappeared. "That vulture giving you trouble?" Clara bristled. "Nothing I can't handle." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it. Still, Boone's got a reputation for pressing advantages where he finds them." "And what would you know about it?" The words came out sharper than intended. "I know he's been buying up property all along Main Street. I know he's not particular about his methods." McAllister's expression darkened, and I know that look on a woman's face when a man's cornered her. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "I don't need rescuing, Mr. McAllister, especially not from a man who thinks throwing money around solves everything." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or respect. Most people in Dry Creek scraped and bowed when James McAllister rode by. "Fair enough." He touched the brim of his hat. "Evening, Mrs. Dawson." He knew her name. Of course he did. Everyone knew the tragic tale of Clara Dawson, the fool who'd believed her husband's pretty lies. McAllister had nearly disappeared into the gathering dusk when his voice carried back. "For what it's worth, Boone's afraid of two things, the law and men richer than him. Use that if you need to." Then he was gone, swallowed by the desert twilight, leaving Clara with the absurd feeling that something had shifted in her small, predictable world. She shook off the notion. Men like James McAllister didn't concern themselves with the troubles of women like her. And even if they did, she'd learned her lesson about trusting men who seemed too good to be true. The walk to her parents' house, her house now, took her past the respectable part of town, where yellow lamplight spilled from windows onto swept porches. Children's laughter drifted on the evening breeze, mixing with the scent of sage and supper cooking. Clara kept her eyes forward, ignoring the curtains that twitched as she passed. "Pride goeth before a fall," Mrs. Henderson had told her last Sunday, loud enough for half the congregation to hear. "Some women just don't know their place." Her place? Clara kicked a stone, sending it skittering into the darkness. Her place was wherever she could scratch out survival in a world that had shown its teeth the moment she'd become inconvenient. The house waited at the edge of town, small and weathered but sturdy. Her father had built it with his own hands, back when Dry Creek was just a handful of buildings and endless possibility. The roses her mother had planted still bloomed by the door, defiant splashes of red against the bleached wood. Clara touched the petals gently, remembering her mother's hands, work rough like her own, but infinitely gentle. "Never let them see you cry, Clara girl," she'd whispered on her deathbed. "Tears just make them think they've won." Inside, the house was sparse but clean. Clara lit the oil lamp, chasing shadows into corners. Her stomach growled, reminding her she'd given her lunch to the Martinez children again. Their father had broken his leg in a mining accident, and pride didn't fill empty bellies. She had some cornmeal left, maybe enough for a small portion of mush. Tomorrow's problem. Everything was tomorrow's problem when today was about surviving until sundown. Clara sank onto the narrow bed, still fully dressed. 1 week, 7 days to conjure money from thin air or lose the last piece of her parents' love. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Love was a lie men told to get what they wanted. Security was an illusion that shattered at the first test. The only truth in this hard world was what you could hold in your own 2 hands, and even that could be ripped away by men like Harlan Boone. Through the thin walls, a coyote howled in the distance. Another answered, then another, until the night filled with their lonely chorus. Clara closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. At least the coyotes were honest about what they were, hunters in a world of prey. She'd almost drifted off when hoofbeats thundered past, heading toward town. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of riders 5, maybe 6, moving fast and purposeful through the darkness, the kind of men who did their business when decent folks were abed. Clara pulled the thin blanket higher, a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night creeping down her spine. Something was brewing in Dry Creek, something that made her troubles with Boone seem small as dust. But that was tomorrow's worry, too. Tonight, she had a roof over her head, roses by her door, and the stubborn beat of her own heart. It wasn't much, but it was hers for 7 more days, at least. In her dreams, she was running through the desert, chasing mirages that dissolved at her touch. Behind her, wolves howled, and their voices sounded almost human, almost like promises, almost like lies. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when pounding on Clara's door jolted her from restless sleep. She fumbled for her father's old pistol, kept loaded beneath her pillow since the night riders had passed. "Open up, Mrs. Dawson," Harlan Boone's voice, accompanied by what sounded like several men. Clara's heart hammered as she pulled on her wrapper. Through the window, she spotted Boone with two rough-looking men hired muscle. No doubt, the kind who enjoyed their work too much. She cracked the door open, keeping the pistol hidden behind her back. "It's barely dawn. Mr. Boone, our business can wait for civilized hours." "I'm done waiting." He shoved a paper at her. "Judge Ferris signed this last night. Emergency foreclosure. You've got 1 hour to clear out." "Well, you said a week." "Changed my mind. Benefits of having the judge as a poker buddy." His smile was cold as a snake's belly. 1 hour, or my associates here will assist you." The taller thug cracked his knuckles meaningfully. Clara's mind raced. This couldn't be legal, but legality meant nothing when the law was bought and paid for. "You can't." "Actually, he can't." The deep voice came from behind Boone. James McAllister sat astride his black stallion, looking like he just happened by, though Clara noticed his hand rested casual-like near his holster. Boone's face flushed purple. "This ain't your concern, McAllister." "Well, now, that's where you're wrong." James dismounted with easy grace, his spurs ringing against the hard-packed earth. "See, I hold the primary note on the Dawson property. Bought it from First National last month. Makes it very much my concern." Clara's knees nearly buckled. Out of the frying pan and into the fire. At least Boone was a devil she knew. "That's impossible," Boone sputtered. "I checked." "You checked wrong." James produced a document from his coat. "All legal and proper, which means your little forgery there isn't worth the paper it's written on." Boone snatched the document, his face growing darker as he read. The hired thugs shifted nervously, clearly preferring odds where rich men with guns weren't involved. "This doesn't change anything," Boone finally spat. "She still owes me. She owes me." James's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from never needing to raise it. "And I'm not calling in the debt yet." Boone crumpled the foreclosure notice, rage twisting his features. "You'll regret this, McAllister. I've got plans for this property." "I'm sure you do." James stepped closer, and though Boone had height on him, he seemed to shrink back. "But here's the thing about plans. Boone, they work better when you don't telegraph them to the whole county." For a moment, violence crackled in the air like heat lightning. Then Boone jerked his head at his men. "This isn't over." "It is for today." James's hand hadn't moved from his gun. "Best you remember that." They watched in tense silence as Boone and his thugs retreated, dust swirling in their wake. Only when they disappeared did Clara realize she was still gripping her father's pistol. "You planning to shoot me with that?" James asked mildly, not even looking at her. Clara lowered the weapon, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. Thank you, but I don't understand. Why would you—" "May I come in?" He finally turned to face her, and something in his expression made her step back, allowing him entry. The house seemed even smaller with him in it. James removed his hat, revealing dark hair shot through with premature silver. Up close, she could see the lines etched by sun and something harder war, maybe, or loss. "Coffee," she offered automatically, then remembered she'd used the last yesterday. "No need." He studied the sparse room, taking in the mended curtains, the empty shelves where her mother's china had been before Clara sold it. "I have a proposition." Here it came. Clara steeled herself. Men like him didn't save women like her without expecting payment. "I need help," he continued, surprising her. "My sister Emily, she's not well. Hasn't been since our parents died. The last woman I hired to tend her left after 3 days. Said the ranch was too isolated." I don't understand what this has to do with... I'll forgive the debt. The whole thing. In exchange, you come work at the Triple M, room, board, and wages besides. Emily needs someone strong, someone who won't coddle her or run at the first difficulty. Clara's pride flared. And you think I'm desperate enough to accept... I think you're practical enough to recognize a fair offer when you hear one. His gray eyes held hers steadily. This isn't charity. Mrs. Dawson, I've seen you handle the drunks at Murphy's, seen you stretch $1 until it screams. Emily needs someone who understands that life isn't always gentle. Why me? Why not some nice widow from church who'd jump at the chance to... She bit off the words, but his slight smile said he'd heard what she hadn't said. Jump at the chance to become the next Mrs. McAllister. Because nice church widows want a Mother Emily, and she's got too much spine for that. She needs a companion, not a nursemaid. He paused. And because you're the only person in this town who's never tried to curry favor with me. Clara turned to the window, watching the sun paint the desert gold. It was a devil's bargain, trading one cage for another. But at least this cage came with wages and the chance to keep her parents home. What aren't you telling me? She faced him again. Men like you don't make deals like this without reason. Something shifted in his expression. Respect. Maybe. Emily's condition, it's not just physical. She has episodes, bad ones. The last companion said she was touched by demons. And is she... She's a 17-year-old girl who watched our parents burn alive in a barn fire. His voice remained level, but Clara caught the tremor beneath. You want demons? There they are. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken ghosts. Clara thought of her own demons, the ones that whispered Thomas's lies in the dark, that painted every kindness as a trap waiting to spring. I won't be anyone's kept woman, she said finally. This is employment, nothing more. Agreed. And I keep this house. It stays in my name. Of course. And if your sister and I don't suit, I'm free to leave with no debt owed. His lips quirked. You'd make a fine lawyer. Mrs. Dawson, yes, agreed. Clara extended her hand like a man would, ignoring propriety. After a moment's surprise, James shook it, his calloused palm warm against hers. When do I start? Today, if you're willing. I've got the wagon outside. Of course he did. Rich men always assumed agreement. But as Clara packed her few belongings, she found she didn't mind his presumption as much as she should have. There was something refreshing about a man who stated his business plain, without flowers and falsehoods. The wagon was well sprung and pulled by matched grays that probably cost more than most folks' houses. James helped her up with impersonal courtesy, then surprised her by taking the reins himself instead of letting one of the ranch hands drive. Tell me about Emily, Clara said as they left Dry Creek behind. What do you want to know? Everything. If I'm to help her, I need to understand her. James guided the horses around a pothole. Considering. She was 7 when they died. Always been delicate, took after our mother that way. But the fire, it broke something in her. Not her mind, exactly. More like her trust in the world staying solid under her feet. And the episodes, night terrors, mostly. Sometimes she'll go days without speaking, just staring at nothing. Other times she's almost her old self, bright, funny, too clever for her own good. He glanced at Clara. The doctors from San Francisco said she needs routine, stability, peace. That why you never married to care for her? The question popped out before Clara could stop it. James's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained even. Among other reasons. Clara recognized a closed door when she heard one. They rode in silence for a while, the desert spreading endless around them. The Triple M ranch house appeared like a mirage larger than Clara had imagined. 2 stories of solid timber and stone, with a wraparound porch that spoke of evenings watching the sunset. It's beautiful, she said, meaning it. My father built it to last, Said McAllister's would be watching sunsets from that porch for 100 years. Something bitter crossed his face. Didn't quite make it 10. A young woman emerged as they pulled up, pale, thin, with James's dark hair but eyes like cornflowers. She moved carefully, as if the ground might shift beneath her at any moment. "Emily," James said gently. "This is Mrs. Dawson. She's come to stay with us." Emily studied Clara with disconcerting intensity. "You're the one who told Banker Boone you'd rather sleep with coyotes." Heat flooded Clara's face. "How did you—" "Tommy Martinez heard you. His sister Rosa works in our kitchen." Emily's smile was sudden and transformative. "I like you already." James helped Clara down from the wagon, and she found herself standing between the McAllister siblings, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. The house loomed before her, solid and imposing as its owner. "Welcome to the Triple Emperor, Mrs. Dawson," James said formally. Clara squared her shoulders. She'd made her choice, traded her independence for survival. But as Emily slipped a thin hand into hers, chattering about showing her the gardens, Clara felt something she hadn't expected. Not hope she'd learned better than that, but maybe, just maybe, the possibility of belonging somewhere again, even if it was just another beautiful lie waiting to crumble. Time would tell. Time always did. The rooster's crow came too early, as it had every morning for the past 2 weeks at the Triple M. Clara rolled from her narrow bed, muscles protesting the constant work. Her hands, already rough from the inn, now bore new calluses from ranch labor. She'd insisted on earning her keep beyond just tending to Emily, and James hadn't argued. Strange man, James McAllister. He'd given her a room on the 2nd floor, near Emily but respectable distant from his own quarters. He treated her with careful courtesy, never overstepping, never suggesting their arrangement was anything but business. It should have put her at ease. Instead, it left her watching him from the corners of her eyes, waiting for the trap to spring. Clara dressed quickly in the practical skirts and blouses James had ordered from town over her protests about charity. "Can't have you tending horses in thin cotton," he'd said, ending the discussion. The clothes were well made but plain, exactly what a hired companion should wear. Nothing to suggest she was anything more. The kitchen was already warm when she entered, Rosa Martinez kneading bread with practiced efficiency. "Morning, Miss Clara." Rosa's smile was genuine, unlike the cold looks Clara still received on her infrequent trips to town. "Coffee's ready, and I saved you some biscuits before the hands descended like locusts." "Bless you." Clara gratefully accepted both. "How's your father?" "Better. That medicine you suggested helped with the pain." Rosa's eyes softened. "We can't thank you enough." Clara waved off the gratitude. She'd simply remembered her mother's remedy for bone aches. Nothing more. But here at the Triple M, such small kindnesses were received like gifts. "Miss Emily had a quiet night," Rosa continued, voice dropping. "But she's been sitting at her window since before dawn, watching something." Clara's stomach tightened. Emily's watching episodes often preceded her bad spells. "I'll check on her." She found Emily exactly as Rosa described. Pale face pressed to the glass, cornflower eyes fixed on the horizon. "What do you see?" Clara asked softly, settling beside her. "Riders," Emily whispered, "coming with the wind." Clara looked but saw only empty desert, heat already beginning to shimmer off the sand. "There's no one there." "Honey." "Not yet." Emily turned those unsettling eyes on her. "But they're coming. Men with guns and greedy hearts. They want what's ours." A chill ran down Clara's spine despite the warming day. Sometimes Emily's visions were just fragments of trauma. Other times, they carried an eerie accuracy that made the ranch hands cross themselves. "Well, if they come, we'll be ready," Clara said practically. "Your brother doesn't strike me as a man who'd let anyone take what's his." Emily's laugh was bitter. too old for her 17 years. James thinks he can protect everyone. It's his greatest strength and his fatal weakness. She gripped Clara's hand suddenly. Promise me something. If I can. When the storm comes, don't let him face it alone. He's been alone too long. Before Clara could respond, Emily's attention shifted, brightness returning to her face. Oh, I forgot to show you the new foal. She's beautiful. Clara, black as midnight with a white star. The change was so abrupt it left Clara reeling, but she'd learned to roll with Emily's moods. They spent the morning in the stables, Emily chattering happily about horses while Clara mucked stalls. It was hard, dirty work, but there was something satisfying about it. Honest labor for honest wages. No debts or obligations beyond what was spelled out plain. You don't have to do that, James's voice came from behind her. Clara didn't jump anymore when he appeared silent as a shadow. The man moved like a cat, all contained power and watchful eyes. I like keeping busy. She leaned on the pitchfork, wiping sweat from her brow. Idle hands and all that? Most ladies would consider this beneath them. Good thing I'm not most ladies, then. That almost smile crossed his face, the one that made him look younger, less carved from stone. No, you certainly aren't. He was dressed for work himself, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. Clara caught herself staring and quickly looked away. She'd learned her lesson about handsome men with strong arms. Emily seems better today, he said, watching his sister groom the new foal with gentle hands. She has good days and bad. Today's good. Thanks to you. Clara shrugged. I don't do anything special. Just treat her like a person instead of broken china. That's more than most manage. He paused. The hands tell me you've been helping with their injuries, too. Sam's cut is healing clean, and Joe's cough is better. My mother was a healer, taught me a few things. Clara resumed mucking, uncomfortable with the praise. It's nothing. It's not nothing. His voice carried an odd note. You've done more for this ranch in 2 weeks than... Jimmy, Emily's delighted squeal cut him off. Look, she's letting me braid her mane. The transformation in James was instant. The stern rancher vanished, replaced by an indulgent older brother. She's beautiful. What will you name her? Hope, Emily said firmly, because that's what we need more of around here. Clara caught James's eye over Emily's head. Something passed between them, wordless but weighted. Then the moment broke as one of the hands burst in. Boss rustlers hit the north pasture, got away with maybe 20 head. James's face hardened back to granite. Saddle Tempest, tell the boys we ride in 10. I'm going to town, Clara announced. We need supplies, and Emily could use an outing. Not today. His tone brooked no argument. Town's not safe right now. Since when? He hesitated. There've been incidents, strangers asking questions, making threats. Until I know what's happening, you and Emily stay here. The high-handed command raised her hackles. I don't recall agreeing to be a prisoner. You agreed to keep Emily safe. His eyes bored into hers. That means staying put when I tell you. They faced off in the dusty stable, wills clashing like flint on steel. Emily watched with interest, the foal forgotten. Nobody talks to Clara that way, she observed. Not even you, James. Emily. She stood up to Banker Boone, stood up to the whole town when they whispered about her. Why should she bow to you? Because I'm trying to protect her. The words exploded out, clearly surprising him as much as anyone. Silence fell like a hammer. Clara felt heat climb her neck, but refused to be the first to look away. We don't need protecting, she said quietly. We need truth. What aren't you telling us? James ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its careful order. Boone's been making deals, bad ones, with worse men. There's talk of forcing out the smaller ranches, consolidating power. And you're the biggest obstacle. The Triple M stands between him and controlling the whole valley. His jaw tightened. I won't let him have it. Then let us help, Emily said suddenly. We're not China dolls. James, either of us. He looked between them, his damaged sister and the sharp-tongued widow he'd inexplicably brought into their lives. Clara saw the moment he made his decision. Sam will go with you to town, armed. You buy what's needed and come straight back. It was a compromise, more than most men would offer. Clara nodded. We'll be careful. You better be, his voice roughened. I've got enough ghosts. Don't need more. He strode out, calling for his horse and men. Clara watched him go, unsettled by the exchange. She'd prepared herself for a man who'd want to own her. She hadn't prepared for one who wanted to protect her. In her experience, the latter could be just as dangerous as the former. He likes you, Emily said matter-of-factly. He needs me to care for you. No. Emily's smile was knowing. He needs you for something else entirely. He just doesn't know it yet. In town, the tension was sharp as a drawn blade. Men clustered in twos and threes, voices low and urgent. Women hurried their shopping, eyes darting nervously. Even the usual drunks outside the saloon seemed subdued. Something's coming, Sam muttered, hand never straying far from his gun. Can smell it like rain before a storm. They completed their errands quickly, Clara ignoring the whispers that followed her through the mercantile. She'd grown a thick skin these past months, armor against a world that loved nothing better than a fallen woman to judge. It was Emily who spotted them first. 5 riders stopped at the edge of town, watching, hard men with harder eyes, the kind who sold their guns to the highest bidder. Clara? Emily's voice was strange, distant. The storm's here. As if her words were a signal. The riders spurred their horses toward the ranch road, toward home, toward James, riding out with too few men to face rustlers who might not be simple thieves after all. Sam! Clara's sharp call brought the hand around. Those men they're heading for, Mr. McAllister. Sam swore colorfully, then remembered the ladies. Pardon, but we need to warn him. Then let's ride. Clara helped Emily into the wagon, then climbed up to take the reins herself. Hold on tight. She slapped leather, sending the horses into a run. Sam galloped alongside, rifle ready. The wagon bounced and jumped over the rough road, Emily clinging white-knuckled to the seat. They'd made it halfway when the sound of gunfire split the air. Not distant, but close, too close. Clara's heart hammered as she drove toward the sound instead of away. Every instinct screamed to run, to protect herself and Emily. But stronger than fear was something she didn't want to name. Something that pictured gray eyes and rare smiles. Strong hands gentle with a damaged sister. She'd sworn never to care about a man again. But as they crested the rise and saw James surrounded, outnumbered, fighting with desperate fury, Clara realized some promises were made to be broken. Even if it killed her. The gunfire echoed across the desert like thunder, each shot driving ice deeper into Clara's veins. Below them, James and 3 of his men had taken cover behind scattered rocks, pinned down by at least 8 riders. The rustlers, if that's what they truly were, had chosen their ambush well. Stay here, Clara ordered Emily, pulling the wagon behind a cluster of boulders. No matter what happens, Clara, don't! But Clara was already moving, grabbing Sam's spare rifle from the wagon bed. Her father had taught her to shoot, back when the frontier was even wilder. She'd never pointed a gun at a man before, but watching James duck as bullets sparked off stone, she found her hands steady as bedrock. Can you get a clear shot? She asked Sam, who'd dismounted and taken position. Maybe, but they've got good cover. He spat tobacco juice. Boss is smart, keeping low, but they're trying to flank him. Clara studied the scene, mind racing. The attackers were focused on James, confident in their numbers. They hadn't noticed the wagon's arrival. Create a distraction, she said. Fire at the ones on the left. I'll circle right. Sam's eyes widened. Ma'am, that's not... Do it. Something in her tone must have convinced him. Sam opened fire, his shots forcing the leftmost attackers to hunker down. Clara used the distraction to slip through the rocks, moving with a silence born of desperate purpose. The heat pressed against her like a living thing, sweat soaking through her blouse. She could hear James shouting orders, his voice calm despite the chaos. That steadiness gave her courage as she found position behind a thorny mesquite. The nearest attacker was focused on reloading, confident in his cover. Clara raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel like her father had taught her. Breathe in, breathe out, squeeze between heartbeats. The shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry. His companions whirled, suddenly realizing they were caught in crossfire. "It's the woman," one shouted. Boone said. He never finished. James, seizing the moment Clara's distraction provided, put a bullet through his hat, sending him diving for cover. The tide turned in seconds. Caught between two positions, the attacker's confidence evaporated. "Pull back," their leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, made the call. "We've lost surprise." They retreated in good order, covering each other, dragging their wounded. James and his men held position until the riders vanished into the heat shimmer, then slowly emerged. Clara found herself shaking now that the danger had passed, rifle suddenly heavy as lead. She'd shot a man, defended life by threatening to take it. The contradiction sat like bile in her throat. Clara James was suddenly there, hands gripping her shoulders, gray eyes wild. "What in God's name were you thinking?" "I was thinking you were outnumbered." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Would you prefer I'd let them kill you?" "I'd prefer you'd stayed safe." His hands tightened. "If something had happened to you..." But it didn't. She pulled free, needing distance from his intensity. "I'm not some delicate flower. James, I thought we'd established that." He stared at her, chest heaving, a thin line of blood trickling from a graze on his cheek. Then, without warning, he yanked her against him, not roughly, but with a desperate strength that spoke of fear transmuted to relief. "Don't ever do that again," he muttered against her hair. Clara stood frozen, acutely aware of his heart hammering against her chest, of the solid warmth of him, of the way her treacherous body wanted to melt into his embrace. Then reality crashed back. She shoved him away. "Don't!" The word came out sharp as glass. "I'm not yours to order around or clutch at when you're scared. I work for you. Nothing more." James stepped back as if slapped. "Clara, I didn't mean..." "Boss!" one of the hands called urgently. "Jimmy's hit!" The moment shattered. They rushed to where Jimmy Tate, youngest of the ranch hands, sat propped against a rock, hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, his face pale beneath its tan. "Let me see." Clara dropped beside him, gently moving his hand. The wound was bad but not fatal if treated quickly. "I need clean cloth, whiskey, and water, now." The men scrambled to obey. Clara worked with focused efficiency, using skills learned at her mother's knee. James hovered close, ready to help, and she forced herself to ignore his presence. "You saved us," Jimmy gasped as she cleaned the wound. "Saw you with that rifle, like an avenging angel." "Hush, save your strength." Emily appeared with the medical supplies from the wagon, her face composed despite the blood. "I brought everything. The carbolic acid, too." "Good girl." Clara worked quickly. Aware they needed to get Jimmy back to the ranch, the boy would live. But infection was always the real killer out here. "They knew we were coming," James said quietly, watching her work. "This wasn't random." "The one I shot said Boone's name." Clara didn't look up from her task. "Said Boone told them about me." James's curse was low and vicious. "He's escalating. This isn't about land anymore." It never was, Emily said unexpectedly. It's about power, about breaking anyone who won't bow to him. She met her brother's eyes. Including you. They made a grim procession back to the ranch, Jimmy groaning with each bump despite Clara's attempts to cushion him. She rode in the wagon bed, keeping pressure on the wound while Emily drove with surprising skill. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Sam asked Clara, riding alongside. "My father. He said a woman alone should know how to defend herself." "Smart man." He was, until fever took him, leaving her mother to struggle alone. Life had a way of taking the smart ones early, leaving the rest to muddle through. At the ranch, they carried Jimmy to the bunkhouse. Clara spent hours cleaning and stitching the wound properly, while Rosa boiled water and tore bandages. The other hands stood vigil, their faces grim. An attack on one was an attack on all frontier justice at its most basic. "He'll live," Clara finally announced. Exhausted. "But he needs rest and watching. The fever will be the test." "I'll sit with him," Joe volunteered. "The least I can do after you fixed my cough." Clara emerged into twilight, surprised to find the day nearly gone. James waited on the porch, silhouetted against the dying light. He'd cleaned up, but she could still see the graze on his cheek, the torn sleeve where a bullet had come too close. "How is he?" "He'll mend." She sank onto the steps, suddenly bone-tired. "Boys that age are tough." "Thanks to you." He settled beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Clara, about earlier." "Forget it. Heat of the moment." "No." His voice was firm. "I won't forget it. Won't apologize for being grateful you're alive, either. But you're right. I overstepped." She studied him sidelong. Most men would have blustered, made excuses, turned it back on her somehow. James McAllister just sat there, accepting the boundary she'd set even if he clearly didn't like it. "They'll be back," she said, changing the subject to safer ground. "Yes." He stared at the horizon where the attackers had vanished. "Boone's thrown the dice now. Can't back down without losing face." "So what do we do?" He turned to her, something unreadable in his eyes. "You and Emily should leave. Go to San Francisco, or back east, somewhere safe until this is over. And if I refuse, then you're a fool." "Been called worse." Clara stood, brushing dust from her skirts. "I don't run. James, not from fights, not from men like Boone, and not from—" She caught herself before finishing that dangerous thought. "From what?" "Nothing. I need to check on Emily." She left him there in the gathering dark, but felt his eyes follow her into the house, in her room. She finally allowed herself to shake, reaction setting in. She'd nearly died today, nearly watched him die, and somewhere between the gunfire and the blood, she'd realized a terrible truth. She cared. Despite every wall she'd built, every promise to herself, she cared what happened to James McAllister, cared about this ranch and these people who'd accepted her when the rest of the world turned its back, cared about Emily, who saw too much with those cornflower eyes. It was the one thing she couldn't afford. Caring meant vulnerability, meant pain when the inevitable betrayal came, because it always came, in the end. Through her window, she could see James still on the porch, standing guard over his domain, a lone figure against the darkness, protecting what was his with stubborn courage. She'd told Emily he couldn't protect everyone, that it was his weakness. Now she wondered if it might be his strength. The night wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain, of change coming whether they were ready or not. Clara touched the glass, watching James pace, and made a decision. If war was coming to the Triple M, she'd face it standing. And if that made her a fool, well, she'd been called worse. But as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed of strong arms and desperate embraces, of gray eyes wild with fear for her safety. And in her dreams, she didn't push him away. In her dreams, she held on tight and never let go. The week following the ambush passed intense vigilance. Guards were posted day and night, and no one rode out alone. Clara threw herself into caring for Jimmy, whose fever broke on the third day, a small victory in an increasingly dark time. She'd also taken to wearing her father's pistol, the weight of it a constant reminder of how quickly violence could shatter the peace. But it was the quiet moments that unsettled her most. The way James's eyes found her across the dinner table. How his hand would hover near her elbow when they passed on the stairs. Not quite touching. The careful distance he maintained that somehow felt more intimate than any closeness. "You're brooding again," Emily observed one afternoon as they tended the garden. Despite everything, the girl insisted on maintaining her roses, as if beauty could ward off the ugliness gathering around them. "I'm thinking," Clara corrected, attacking weeds with perhaps more vigor than necessary, "about my brother." "About the situation." Emily's laugh was knowing. "Same thing, really. James is the situation, and the situation is James. He's been that way since the war, taking everyone's burden as his own." Clara paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "He fought cavalry, came back with medals and nightmares." Emily's voice softened. "Lost his best friend saving a supply wagon. Still blames himself. Says he should have seen the ambush coming." The information settled into Clara's chest like a stone. Another piece of the puzzle that was James McAllister, a man who collected guilt like some collected gold. That's why he couldn't save them, Emily continued, staring at something only she could see. "Our parents. He was 20 miles away when the barn caught fire. Rode Tempest nearly to death trying to get back, but..." She shrugged, a gesture too casual for the weight of the words. "Emily, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." The girl's cornflower eyes sharpened. "He's falling for you, Clara, and you're fighting it like a wildcat in a sack." Heat flooded Clara's face. "That's not true. Please, I may have episodes, but I'm not blind." Emily returned to her roses, humming softly. "The question is, what you're going to do about it." "Nothing. There's nothing to do." "You could try being happy. I hear it's nice." Clara opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of approaching horses killed the words. Multiple riders, coming fast. She drew her pistol, pushing Emily behind her. "Inside, now." But Emily was already moving, not to the house, but to the bell they'd installed after the ambush. 3 sharp rings the signal for trouble. Men poured from the bunkhouse and barn, weapons ready. James emerged from the house, rifle in hand, taking in the situation with a glance. He positioned himself between the approaching riders and the women, a gesture that made Clara's traitorous heart skip. But as the dust cleared, it wasn't Boone's hired guns who appeared. It was Sheriff Watson and a posse of townsmen, their faces grim. "James," the sheriff called, not dismounting. "We need to talk." "So talk." Watson shifted uncomfortably. "There's been trouble in town. The bank was robbed last night. Boone's claiming you were behind it." "That's absurd." James's voice could have cut glass. "Why would I rob a bank I don't even use?" "That's what I said. But Boone's got witnesses saying they saw Triple M horses nearby. He's demanding an investigation." "Witnesses?" James spat the word. "Let me guess, men on his payroll." "I can't prove that." Watson looked genuinely troubled. "But I've got to follow up. You understand?" "What I understand is that Boone's getting desperate." James gestured to his men. "Search all you want. Sheriff, you won't find any stolen money here." The search was perfunctory, Watson clearly going through the motions, but Clara noticed how some of the townsmen looked at them suspicious, eager to believe the worst. Boone had been poisoning the well of public opinion, and it was working. "There's more," Watson said quietly, pulling James aside. But Clara, hovering nearby, caught the words. "Judge Farris is pushing for a special election." New sheriff, new mayor. Boone's backing both candidates. He's taking over the whole town, James muttered. Trying to. Some of us are fighting it, but... Watson shrugged helplessly. Money talks loud out here. After the posse left, the ranch felt smaller somehow, as if the world was pressing in from all sides. James called a meeting in the main room, his face carved from stone. We need to prepare for the worst, he said without preamble. Boone's not going to stop with false accusations. Any man who wants to leave, I'll pay fair wages and give you a good horse. No shame in it. Not one hand moved. You gave us work when no one else would. Sam said simply, we stand with the brand. This isn't your fight. Hell, it isn't. Joe interrupted. Pardon the language. Ladies, but Boone's type doesn't stop with one ranch. He gets the Triple M. He'll come for all of us eventually. James's throat worked. Thank you, all of you. As the men filed out to resume their posts, Clara found herself alone with James. The late afternoon light slanted through windows, painting golden bars across the floor. You should reconsider my offer, he said quietly, about leaving. You should stop trying to protect everyone from their own choices. He turned to her then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I can't seem to help it, especially when it comes to you. James, I know. He held up a hand. You work for me, nothing more. You've made that clear. But Clara, The words died as Emily's scream shattered the moment. They ran, finding her in her room, pressed against the window, shaking. Fire, she whispered. I smell fire. The barn's burning. The horses are screaming. Mother's calling for help, but I can't find her. I can't. There's no fire, James said gently, pulling her away from the window. Emily, you're here. You're safe. But Emily was lost in memory, reliving that night 10 years ago. Clara had seen it before, but never this severe. The girl's whole body shook, eyes seeing horrors only she could witness. Get the laudanum? Clara ordered, taking Emily's weight as her knees buckled. Just a small dose. I don't want to drug her. She'll hurt herself like this. Trust me. Together they got Emily to bed, Clara holding her while James administered the medicine, slowly, heartbreakingly. The tremors eased. Emily's eyes focused, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm broken. I'll always be broken. Hush. Clara smoothed her hair. You're not broken. You're surviving. There's a difference. Emily's hand found hers, gripping tight. Don't leave us. Clara, please. He needs you. Clara's eyes met James's over Emily's head. The naked emotion there made her look away. I'm not going anywhere. They sat vigil as Emily drifted into drugged sleep. The room was dim, intimate, filled with unspoken words. This is why. James said eventually, why I never... She needs stability, continuity. I couldn't ask anyone to... You're not asking. Clara's voice was firm. I'm choosing... He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Clara. Boss! The shout from outside shattered the moment. Riders coming, lots of them! They rushed out to find chaos, not an attack, but refugees, 3 families in wagons, their belongings hastily packed. The Hendersons. Clara recognized her former neighbors. What's happened? Boone. Mr. Henderson spat. Foreclosed on half the town today. Anyone who wouldn't sign his loyalty pledge. He can't do that, James protested. He's got the judge in his pocket and hired guns on every corner. Mrs. Henderson looked exhausted, defeated. We heard you were standing against him, hoping maybe... Of course. James didn't hesitate. There's room in the bunkhouse, and we can raise more shelters. You're welcome here. As the families were settled, Clara watched James orchestrate aid with quiet efficiency. He was building something here, not just a ranch, but a refuge, a place where people could stand together against tyranny. She thought of Emily's words about choosing happiness, thought of her own walls, built so high and strong, but walls could protect, or they could imprison. Maybe it was time to figure out which hers were doing. That night, unable to sleep, Clara found herself on the porch. The stars blazed overhead, indifferent to human struggles. She didn't startle when James joined her. She'd been expecting him. Somehow. Can't sleep either. Too much to think about. She pulled her shawl tighter. You're starting a war. Taking in those families. War's already here. I'm just choosing my side. They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching. The night was cool, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Clara, James said softly. What Emily said. Was the laudanum talking? Was it? The question hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Clara felt herself balanced on a precipice, one step from falling into something that terrified her more than any hired gun. I can't, she whispered. I trusted once, loved once. It nearly destroyed me. I'm not him. James's voice was rough with emotion. I'm not asking for your trust. Clara, I'm hoping to earn it. And if you can't, then I'll settle for whatever you can give. He turned to face her, starlight silvering his features. Even if it's just this, standing together in the dark, facing what comes. Clara felt her walls crack, just a little. You barely know me. I know you stood between Emily and danger without hesitation. I know you risked your life for men you'd known 2 weeks. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met and never ask for thanks. His hand found hers in the darkness. I know your courage humbles me daily. James, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Just don't shut me out entirely. Let me hope. Clara looked at their joined hands, his calloused palm warm against hers. Such a simple touch, but it sent fire through her veins. She thought of Thomas, of lies and betrayal. Then she thought of James, standing between danger and everyone he cared about, never counting the cost. I'm not good at hope, she admitted. Neither was I. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Maybe we can learn together. It wasn't a declaration of love. Wasn't a promise of forever. It was something more fragile and more precious, an acknowledgement of possibility. Clara squeezed his hand once before letting go. Maybe. She left him on the porch, but felt lighter somehow. The walls were still there, but perhaps they had a door now. Whether she'd ever find the courage to open it remained to be seen. In her room, she touched her lips, remembering that desperate kiss during the ambush's aftermath. She'd pushed him away then, terrified of what it meant. Now, lying in the dark with change pressing in from all sides, she wondered if pushing him away was just another kind of prison, one she'd built all by herself. The storm struck without warning on a moonless night, not a storm of wind and rain, but of men and malice, orchestrated with the precision of a military campaign. Clara woke to the sound of breaking glass and Emily's terrified scream. Get down! James's voice roared through the house as windows shattered under a hail of gunfire. Clara rolled from bed, grabbing her pistol and crawling to Emily's room. The girl was pressed against the floor, hands over her ears, reliving nightmares made fresh. It's not the fire, Clara said firmly, pulling Emily behind the heavy dresser. Listen to my voice. We're going to be fine. Outside, the night erupted. Rifle fire cracked from multiple directions, the refugees and ranch hands returning fire from hastily fortified positions. But the attackers had come prepared, using the darkness and superior numbers to devastating effect. They're trying to burn the barn, someone shouted. Clara's blood turned to ice. The barn held not just horses, but families, women and children who'd sought shelter. She made a decision that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. Stay here, she ordered Emily. Lock the door behind me. Clara, no. But Clara was already moving, staying low as she navigated the hallway. She found James at a front window, rifles spitting fire into the darkness. "The barn," she said simply. "I know." His face was granite in the muzzle flashes. "They're covering the approaches. Anyone who tries." "Then we need a distraction." Clara checked her pistol. "How many sticks of dynamite do you have in the storage shed?" James turned to stare at her. "You're not serious." "Those families will burn. Emily will watch it happen." She met his eyes steadily. "How many—" "Clara." The protest died on his lips. He understood what she wasn't saying, that Emily couldn't survive watching another fire claim innocent lives. 6 sticks, back wall of the shed. "Have Sam ready the water wagon. When you hear the blast, we'll be ready." He caught her arm as she turned. "Clara, be careful." "Too late for that." She slipped out the back, using shadows and outbuildings for cover. The shed was 30 yards away, might as well have been 30 miles with bullets whining overhead. But Clara had learned something these past weeks. Fear was just another voice, and voices could be ignored when necessary. She made it to the shed as the first flames licked at the barn's walls. Inside, working by touch, she found the dynamite. Her father had used it for clearing stumps, taught her to respect its power. Now she'd use that knowledge to save lives. The water wagon sat between the house and barn. Sam crouched beside it with 2 other men. Clara needed to draw the attacker's attention away from that crucial path. She lit the fuse with shaking hands, counting seconds. Then she ran, not away from danger, but straight toward it, hurling the bundled sticks at the attacker's main position behind the corral. The explosion lit the night like hellfire. Men screamed, horses bolted, and for precious seconds, chaos reigned. Sam didn't waste the opportunity, driving the water wagon toward the barn at breakneck speed. Clara didn't see what happened next. A hand grabbed her from behind, spinning her around. One of Boone's hired killers, face twisted with rage. "You little—" She shot him point blank, the pistol bucking in her hand. He fell backward, surprise replacing anger. Clara didn't wait to see if he'd get up. She ran for the house, bullets chasing her heels. James hauled her through the door, slamming it behind them. "That was insane." "That was necessary." She was shaking now, adrenaline turning to ice in her veins. "Did Sam—" "He made it. They're fighting the fire." James gripped her shoulders, and this time she didn't pull away. "You could have been killed." "So could those families." "I don't care about—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Yes, I do. But Clara, you matter more." The raw honesty in his voice undid her. "James?" Boss Joe burst in, bleeding from a scalp wound. "They're pulling back. Sheriff Watson's coming with a bigger posse." Indeed, the gunfire was tapering off, replaced by the thunder of many horses. The attackers melted into the night like the cowards they were, leaving destruction in their wake. Sheriff Watson's arrival brought order but no justice. Though the evidence was too clear, he shook his head grimly. "Without witnesses willing to testify, my hands are tied. Boone will claim these were rogue elements, nothing to do with him." "This is attempted murder." James's control finally cracked. "Arson, there are children here." "I know." Watson looked older, defeated. "But knowing and proving are different things. Half my deputies are on Boone's payroll now. The other half are too scared to act." "Then we're alone," Clara said quietly. "Not alone." Watson met her eyes. "There are still good people in town. They're just waiting for someone to show them how to stand up." As dawn broke, revealing the full extent of the damage, Clara found herself coordinating medical care for the wounded. 3 men had been hit, plus numerous cuts and burns from fighting the fire. The barn stood, scarred but intact, lives saved, if nothing else. "You did this, Mrs. Henderson said, gripping Clara's hands. "You saved our children." "We all did it," No. The older woman's eyes were fierce. You showed us how, all these weeks, we whispered about you, judged you, but when evil came calling, you stood while we cowered. Clara didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't a hero, just a woman who'd learned that some things mattered more than safety. She found Emily in the garden, mechanically tending her roses. The girl looked fragile as glass, but somehow unbroken. You went into the fire, Emily said without looking up. Not away from it, into it. The barn needed saving. So did you. Emily finally met her eyes. From the fire you carry inside, the one that tells you love will burn you alive. Emily. He kissed you, didn't he, during the first attack, like a drowning man grabbing for air? Emily smiled sadly. I see things, Clara, sometimes true things, and I see how you both circle each other like wounded animals, wanting comfort but fearing the pain. Clara sank onto the garden bench, exhaustion hitting like a physical blow. I don't know how to trust again. Then don't, Emily joined her, linking their arms. Trust is for people who've never been burned, but maybe you can choose to love despite the scars, because of them, even. When did you get so wise? A trauma ages you, Emily said simply. But Clara, sometimes beautiful things grow from ashes. Look at my roses planted in soil enriched by fire. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, watching the ranch slowly return to order. Men worked to repair damage. Women tended wounds. Children played with the resilience of youth, life persisting despite violence's best efforts. James appeared around noon, looking haggard but determined. Boone's called a town meeting. Tonight, he's pushing for emergency measures martial law, essentially, with his men as enforcement. Can he do that? With Judge Ferris backing him? Probably. James ran a hand through his hair. Clara, I need to ask something of you. Name it. Come with me to the meeting. Stand with me publicly. He met her eyes. I know it will make you more of a target. I'm already a target. Clara stood, decision crystallizing. And I'm tired of hiding from small men with big ambitions. Something shifted in James's expression, relief, admiration, and something deeper. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might start a riot. Wouldn't be the first time. His lips quirked in that almost smile. Wear your best dress. If we're facing down tyranny, might as well look good doing it. That evening, Clara stood before her small mirror, wearing the one fine dress she'd kept deep blue wool that brought out her eyes. She'd pinned her hair up properly, applied a touch of her mother's rouge, armor of a different sort. Beautiful, Emily pronounced from the doorway. He won't be able to think straight. That's not the point. Isn't it? Emily's grin was impish. Men like Boone use intimidation and violence, but a woman who's not afraid, who stands tall despite their worst, that's a weapon they don't understand. A knock interrupted. James stood in the hallway, dressed in his best black suit, looking every inch the successful rancher. But it was the expression in his eyes when he saw her that stole Clara's breath. You're stunning, he said simply. It's just a dress. No. He offered his arm. It's courage wearing silk. Shall we go terrify some cowards? Clara slipped her hand through his arm, feeling the solid strength of him. Let's. The ride to town was tense, accompanied by armed ranch hands. But as they entered the packed meeting hall, Clara felt an unexpected calm descend. She'd survived abandonment, poverty, and gunfire. Harlan Boone and his purchased power seemed almost quaint by comparison. The hall buzzed with tension. Boone stood at the front, Judge Ferris beside him, surrounded by hired guns barely pretending to be deputies. But Clara noticed something else: pockets of resistance. Watson and his remaining loyal men. The Hendersons and other displaced families. Even some of the townspeople who'd shunned her nodded respectfully as she passed. McAllister? Boone's voice carried over the crowd. Come to surrender, smart man. Come to remind folks what democracy looks like. James replied calmly. Though I understand if you've forgotten. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Boone's face darkened. You brought your woman. I see, the widow Dawson. He made her name sound like something dirty. Interesting choice, standing with a woman of her reputation. Clara felt James tense, but she squeezed his arm in warning. This was her fight. My reputation, she said, voice carrying clearly, is for hard work, straight talk, and standing up to bullies who think money makes them mighty. What's yours, Mr. Boone? Gasps and nervous laughter met her words. Boone's face went purple. You dare. I dare quite a lot, actually. Clara stepped forward, James letting her go reluctantly. I dare to work honest jobs while you scheme and steal. I dare to protect families while you burn barns with children inside. I dare to stand here, in front of God and everybody, and call you what you are, a coward who hires other men to do his killing. The hall erupted. Boone's men reached for weapons. Watson's men tensed to respond, and for a moment violence seemed inevitable. Then Emily's voice rang out, clear and haunting. I smell smoke. Everyone froze. Emily stood in the doorway, eyes unfocused, seeing beyond the present. I smell smoke, she repeated. And I hear Mother screaming, but this time someone comes. Someone saves them. Her eyes found Clara. Someone chooses love over fear. In the ringing silence that followed, something broke. Maybe it was the spell of intimidation Boone had woven. Maybe it was the sight of a damaged girl speaking truth. But suddenly, people were standing, first one, then another, then dozens, standing with the McAllisters, standing against tyranny. This isn't over, Boone snarled, but he was already backing toward the door. No, James agreed. But your part in it is, get out of my town. It wasn't really his town, but as the crowd parted to let Boone and his men slink away, as neighbors who'd been cowed found their courage, as Sheriff Watson stepped forward to restore real order, it felt like it could be. Outside, under stars bright as hope, Clara found herself in James's arms, not desperate this time, not grabbed in fear, but held like something precious. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. He pulled back to look at her. It's acting despite it. And Clara, you're the bravest person I know. She stood on her toes and kissed him then, there in front of the whole town. Not because she trusted him completely, not because her scars had healed, but because Emily was right. Sometimes you chose love despite the damage. Because of it, even when they broke apart, his eyes were wondering. Clara, I'm not promising anything, she said quickly. I'm still broken in places, still scared. But James, I'm tired of letting fear win. We can go slow, he promised. Whatever you need. What I need, she said, is to go home, our home, and figure out what comes next. As they rode back to the Triple M, Emily between them humming softly, Clara felt something she'd thought lost forever, hope. Not the naive hope of her youth, but something harder won and more precious. Love might be a risk, but living without it, that was the real danger. The morning after the town meeting dawned clear and peaceful, but Clara knew better than to trust the quiet. Boone might have retreated, but cornered snakes struck hardest. She found James in his study, maps spread across the desk, planning defenses with Sam and Joe. He'll come at night again, Sam was saying. Man like that won't risk daylight. A rifle shot cracked across the morning air. Then another. Clara's blood froze as she recognized the pattern, not an attack, but a signal. 3 shots meant riders approaching under truce. They emerged cautiously to find Judge Ferris approaching alone, white handkerchief tied to his rifle barrel. The corrupt judge looked haggard, older, as if the night had aged him years. McAllister, he called, reining up at a safe distance. "I come with terms." "Boone's terms." James kept his rifle ready. "Not interested." "My terms." Ferris dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I want out. This has gone too far." Clara studied the judge's face, seeing genuine fear there. Whatever Boone had planned, it had finally pushed even his bought men past comfort. "Talk," James said curtly. "Boone's lost his mind. After last night, he's talking about burning the whole valley if that's what it takes. Says he'll blame it on Apache raids." Ferris swallowed hard. "There are lines I won't cross, not for any amount of money." "Convenient time to grow a conscience," Clara observed. The judge flinched. "I deserve that. But I'm here. Aren't I Boone's gathering men at the old Pemberton mine? Professional killers from Mexico. Army deserters. The worst scum money can buy. They plan to hit you tomorrow night, not just the ranch, but every family that stood with you in town." Emily appeared on the porch, moving with that eerie grace she had during her clear-seeing moments. "He's telling the truth. The snake sheds its skin when the poison turns inward." Ferris stared at her. "The girls touched. They said, but she sees true. Doesn't she?" "What do you want?" James asked. "Safe passage east. A horse, supplies, and your word you won't send anyone after me." The judge reached into his coat slowly, producing a thick envelope. "In return, signed testimonies. Everything I know about Boone's operations. Enough to see him hang twice over." James took the envelope, scanning its contents. His expression darkened with each page. "He's been stealing from the railroad, too, selling protection to cargo thieves. The railroad has investigators coming. I was supposed to misdirect them." Ferris laughed bitterly. "Another week and Boone would own everything from here to the state line." "Get your horse and go," James said finally. "But Ferris, if this is a trick—" "It's not." The judge looked older, defeated. "I sold my soul for comfort. McAllister, the least I can do is buy it back with truth." They watched him ride away, a broken man fleeing the consequences of his choices. Clara felt no sympathy too many had suffered for his greed, but she understood the courage it took to turn back from a dark path. "Tomorrow night," James mused. "Not much time." "Enough," Watson said. He'd arrived during the conversation, bringing a handful of good men. "With Ferris's testimony, I can deputize volunteers, make this legal. How many guns can you muster?" "Maybe 30, counting the refugees." James frowned. "Against professional killers." "You're forgetting something," Clara interrupted. "The women." "Clara, no." "Yes." Her voice brooked no argument. "We've all lost too much to Boone's greed. You think Mrs. Henderson can't shoot, or Rosa, or any woman who's survived out here?" She met his eyes steadily. "This is our fight, too." Emily clapped her hands. "The warrior queen rallies her troops. Oh, this will be a story worth telling." By noon, the Triple M had transformed into a fortress. Women who'd cowered during the last attack now checked rifles with grim determination. Children were sent to town with trusted guards, while everyone else prepared for war. Clara found herself teaching town ladies to load and shoot, their soft hands blistering but determined misses. Henderson proved surprisingly adept. "My first husband taught me," she admitted, "before the fever took him. Never thought I'd need it again." "We do what we must," Clara replied, adjusting the woman's stance. "For our families, for our future." As afternoon wore on, unexpected reinforcements arrived, ranchers from neighboring spreads. Hearing of the stand against Boone, the Apache trader Black Horse, whose people had suffered from Boone's protection schemes, even some of Boone's former employees, sickened by his escalating madness. 60 guns, Sam reported with satisfaction. "Maybe 70. We might just survive this." James pulled Clara aside as sunset approached. They stood by the corral, watching shadows lengthen across the desert. I need you to promise something. He began. No. You don't even know what. You want me to take Emily and run if things go bad. Clara faced him squarely. The answer is no. Clara, please, if something happens to me. She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her fear and determination into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Nothing will happen to you, she said fiercely, because I won't let it. We stand together or not at all. Stubborn woman. But his eyes were soft. What did I do to deserve you? You saw me, Clara said simply. Not the widow, not the scandal, just me. That's everything. James. He pulled her close, and they stood together as darkness gathered. Tomorrow would bring violence and possibly death. But tonight, they had this two damaged souls finding healing in each other's arms. Emily's bell rang out riders approaching fast, but instead of attack, it was one of Watson's deputies, horse lathered with sweat. They're coming early, he gasped. Boone got word about the reinforcements. They're less than an hour out. Chaos erupted as defenders scrambled to positions. Clara found her assigned spot the house's upper windows, commanding a clear view of the approach. Emily was there too, calmly loading rifles. You should be in the cellar, Clara said. And miss the grand finale, Emily smiled. Besides, I've hidden from fire long enough. Time to face it. The first shots came from the outer guards, quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers. Clara watched muzzle flashes in the darkness, counting enemies. More than expected. Far more. They've got a cannon, someone shouted. Small one, but the first blast shook the house, showering them with plaster dust. A cannon changed everything. Walls meant nothing against artillery. Fall back to the secondary positions. James's voice carried over the din. Clara fired methodically, picking targets, trying not to think about how each fallen shadow was a human being. The cannon roared again, punching a hole in the barn. Smoke began to rise. Fire. Always fire in the end. Clara, Emily grabbed her arm. Look. Through the smoke and chaos, Clara saw him, Boone himself, directing the cannon crew. The coward had finally come to finish things personally. An idea formed, crazy, dangerous, but possible. Emily, can you keep them busy from here? What are you, Clara? No. But Clara was already moving, slipping down the back stairs and out into the battle. She needed to reach the shed, where James kept the remaining dynamite. Bodies moved in the darkness, friend or foe. Impossible to tell. Clara stayed low, using smoke for cover. A man loomed from the shadows. Gun raising, but she shot first. No time for hesitation now. The shed was partially collapsed from cannon fire, but the dynamite remained intact. Clara grabbed what she could carry, fuses already calculating in her mind. The cannon had to go, or they were all dead. She circled wide, using the burning barn for cover. The heat seared her skin, brought back memories of Thomas leaving, of everything burning down, but this time, she wasn't running from fire, she was bringing it. The cannon crew was focused on reloading, Boone screaming orders. Clara lit the bundled dynamite, counted to 3, and threw with all her strength. Down! Boone's scream came too late. The explosion was devastating. The cannon disappeared in a ball of flame, taking half the crew with it. Boone was blown backward, rolling in the dirt. Clara didn't wait to see more. She ran for the house as bullets filled the air where she'd been. Behind her, the tide of battle shifted. Without their artillery, the attackers faltered. Push them back, Watson roared. For the valley. What followed was brutal but brief. Demoralized by the loss of their advantage and their leader's fall, the hired killers began to retreat. Some surrendered, throwing down weapons. Others fled into the desert, where Black Horse's Apache friends waited. Clara found James in the aftermath, bleeding from a graze on his temple but whole. They clung to each other amid the smoke and carnage, hearts beating in desperate synchronization. "You magnificent fool," he murmured. "You could have been killed." "So could you." She pulled back to examine his wound. "We need to clean this." "Clara." His hands framed her face. "Marry me." The words hung between them like suspended stars. Around them, people celebrated victory, tended wounded, fought fires, but in their small bubble of reality, only this moment mattered. "James, I know you're scared. I know trust comes hard." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "But Clara, I almost lost you tonight. I won't waste another day pretending I don't love you with everything I have." "I thought love was a lie," she whispered. "Maybe it was with him." James's eyes never left hers. "But this what we have, it's the truest thing I know." Clara thought of walls and wounds, of fires that consumed and fires that warmed, of a bitter woman who'd sworn off love facing a man who'd kissed her like he'd been starving for years. Because they both had. "Yes," she said simply. His kiss tasted of smoke and victory, of promises made in the ashes of war, when they broke apart. Emily was there, grinning despite the soot on her face. "About time," she declared. "I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a barn." "No barns," Clara said quickly, making them all laugh despite everything. Watson approached, leading a battered but living Boone in chains. The banker's empire had crumbled in a single night, brought down by his own overreach. "He'll hang for this," Watson said with satisfaction. "The territorial governor sending real law to clean up the rest." But Clara barely heard him. She was watching the sunrise paint the desert gold, James's arms solid around her waist, Emily humming beside them. The Triple M stood scarred but unbroken, like its people. "What now?" James asked softly. Clara considered. A week ago, she'd have said survival was enough. But standing here in the dawn of a new day, surrounded by chosen family, she wanted more. "Now," she smiled, "now we build something worth having. Together." "Together," he agreed, and sealed it with another kiss. In the distance, a meadowlark began to sing, welcoming the morning. And Clara Dawson, soon to be Clara McAllister, finally understood that sometimes the greatest courage wasn't in standing alone. It was in choosing to stand with someone else, despite all the reasons not to. It was in choosing love. 3 months had passed since the battle at Triple M, and the valley had transformed. Where fear once ruled, hope now flourished. The ranch had become more than just a home. It was a beacon for those seeking fresh starts and second chances. Clara stood before the mirror in her old room at her parents' house, smoothing the cream-colored wedding dress Rosa and Mrs. Henderson had spent weeks creating, simple but elegant, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn to marry Thomas. This dress spoke of practicality and beauty combined, much like the life she was choosing. "You look like an angel," Emily said from the doorway, wearing a soft blue dress that brought out her eyes. The girl had bloomed these past months, her episodes becoming rarer, her smiles more frequent. "Angels don't usually carry pistols," Clara replied, patting the small gun concealed in her bodice. "Old habits died hard." Emily laughed. "The best ones do. Are you ready?" Was she Clara touched the window, looking out at the desert that had witnessed so much pain and triumph. "I spent so long believing love was a lie that I forgot it could also be truth. The deepest truths often hide behind the biggest lies," Emily said, wise beyond her years. "But you found your way through." A knock interrupted. Rosa peered in, eyes bright with excitement. "It's time, Miss Clara. The whole town's waiting." Indeed, the street outside was packed. Word of the wedding had spread, drawing people from miles around, not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate the valley's freedom from tyranny. Clara Dawson, the scorned widow, marrying James McAllister, The wealthy rancher who'd risked everything for justice. It was a story worth telling. The walk to the church felt both endless and too quick. Clara's heart hammered as she saw the crowd. The decorated entrance, the weight of so many eyes. Then the doors opened, and all her fears evaporated. James stood at the altar, magnificent in his black suit, gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. Beside him, Sam and Joe grinned, while Sheriff Watson stood ready to serve as witness. The church was full to bursting, every pew packed with faces that had become family. Her father should have walked her down this aisle. Instead, Clara walked alone, head high, choosing her own path as she always had. But she wasn't truly alone. Emily fell into step beside her, and then Mrs. Henderson on her other side, and suddenly she was surrounded by the women who'd stood with her, fought with her, believed in her when the world hadn't. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Reverend Morris asked when they reached the altar. "She gives herself," Emily announced clearly, "with the blessing of all who love her." A ripple of approval went through the crowd. James's smile could have lit the desert for miles. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional with one exception. When it came time for promises, James took both her hands. "Clara," he said, voice carrying to every corner of the church, "I promise to love you not in spite of your scars, but because they made you who you are. I promise to stand beside you, never above you, to trust you with my fears as you've trusted me with yours, and to remember every day that love isn't a lie. It's a choice we make, again and again." Clara's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed, not from sorrow this time, but from joy so fierce it almost hurt. "James," she replied, "I promise to choose you every morning, even when fear whispers old lies. I promise to build with you, dream with you, and face whatever storms come our way, because you taught me that love isn't about never falling, it's about always getting back up, together." When Reverend Morris pronounced them husband and wife, when James kissed her like a man who'd been starving for years because he had been, they both had, the church erupted in celebration. Bells rang, people cheered, and somewhere in the crowd, Clara could have sworn she heard her mother's laughter on the wind. The reception filled the entire main street, tables groaning with food donated by grateful families. Musicians played, children danced, and for one golden afternoon, the harsh frontier felt like paradise. "No regrets?" James asked as they watched the sun paint the desert in shades of fire. "None," Clara said firmly. "Though I do have one question." "What's that?" "What exactly are we going to do with a ranch that's become a small town?" He laughed, pulling her close. "Build something worth having. A place where people can start over, where the past doesn't define the future. A place where love isn't a lie," she added softly. "Exactly." Emily appeared, dragging Black Horse's nephew by the hand. "Dance with me," she demanded, and soon the street was full of swirling couples. As night fell and lanterns were lit, creating pools of warm light in the darkness, Clara found herself on the porch of the ranch house, their house now. The celebration continued in the distance, but here it was quiet, peaceful. "I have something for you," James said, producing a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver locket, simple but beautiful. Clara opened it to find 2 miniature photographs, one of James and Emily, the other a space waiting to be filled. "For the family we're building," he explained. Clara kissed him, pouring all her gratitude, love, and hope into the gesture. When they broke apart, she saw their future spread before them, not easy, perhaps, but real and solid in theirs. "Mrs. McAllister," James said, testing the words. "How does it feel?" Clara considered. The wounded widow who'd arrived at Triple M seemed like a different person, someone from a story she'd once heard. That woman had believed love was a lie, that trust was foolish, that walls were the only protection. This woman, Clara McAllister, knew better. Love wasn't a lie or a truth. It was a choice, made daily, to see past fear to possibility. It was James defending her honor, Emily's wisdom beyond her years, Rosa's quiet friendship, and a town standing together against tyranny. It was a house with lights burning against the darkness, welcoming all who needed shelter. "It feels like home," she said simply, as if in agreement. A coyote howled in the distance, not threatening this time, but wild and free and honest. Another answered, then another, until the night filled with their ancient song. Clara had once told Boone she'd rather sleep with the coyotes than bow to his corruption. Now, standing with James on their porch, their ranch spread before them like a promise, she understood what that truly meant. The coyotes were survivors, fierce and loyal to their pack. They faced the harsh desert with cunning and courage, turning challenge into strength. Just like her, just like them. "Shall we go in, Mrs. McAllister?" James asked. "Our guests will wonder where we've gone." "Let them wonder," Clara said, but she took his offered hand. "We have a lifetime to satisfy their curiosity." They walked back toward the lights and music, toward family and future. Behind them, the desert stretched endless and demanding, beautiful in its severity. It would test them again. Clara knew. Life always did. But they would face it together, the damaged soldier and the bitter widow who'd found healing in each other's arms, who discovered that sometimes the greatest courage wasn't in standing alone, but in choosing to trust, to love, to build something larger than yourself. The coyotes sang them home, and Clara smiled. She'd thought love was a lie until a broken cowboy kissed her like he'd been starving for years. Now she knew the truth. They'd both been starving, just waiting for someone brave enough to share the feast. And what a feast it would be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening while driving through your own frontier, cozied up at home, or perhaps on a night shift, keeping watch like our heroes at the Triple M? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of courage, redemption, and love in the American frontier. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover Clara and James's journey. Until next time, partners.